General Motors CEO to Washington, I'm not asking for a bailout, September 12th, 2008. Today, General Motors CEO Rick Wagner has been addressing the Senate Energy Committee, encouraging them to appropriate $3.8 billion in funds that would allow automakers to receive at least $25 billion in low-interest government loans. Wagner also said the $25 billion sum was a very good amount. The loans first approved in last year's energy package are supposed to be used to produce vehicles that are 25% more efficient. But Wagner says those rules should also be loosened and be applicable to the production of vehicles moving in the right direction. September 12, 2008, GM spokesperson Greg Martin said specifically tied the Volt to this loan, saying certainly a program like the Chevy Volt would qualify under these guidelines. September 18th, 2008, Detroit wants its bailout too. General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford wants at least $25 billion in guaranteed loans. Critics want to know where the money is going. When General Motors unveiled its much-anticipated Chevy Volt this week, it also repeated pleas for the government to fund loans to the automakers. That plea ignited a firestorm of questions for CEO Rick Wagner, who insisted that the government incentives he seeks in the form of proposed $25 billion loans to GM, Ford, and Chrysler that's now before Congress are not a bailout. This isn't the first time Detroit has sought a bailout. Late last year, Congress approved $25 billion loan package but never funded it. Then in August, the carmakers asked for $50 billion, only to cut that request in half. October 16, 2008. On September 19, 2008, Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson proposed a sweeping bailout of financial institutions battered by bad mortgages and loss of investor confidence. In Mr. Paulson's original proposal, called the Troubled Asset Relief Program, he asked Congress for $700 billion to use to buy up mortgage-backed securities whose value had dropped sharply or had become impossible to sell. Now, I think that's a strange coincidence. Bob Lutz from Detroit had been meeting with Paulson about bailouts, and the day after, one of the last addresses was the day Henry Paulson proposed the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the $700 billion that started all these bailouts and economic stimulus. Paulson was nominated by U.S. President George Bush to succeed John Snow as the Treasury Secretary on May 30th, 2006. On March 23rd, 2006, General Motors announced that it completed the sale of 78% of interest in GMAC Commercial Holdings, its commercial real estate subsidiary, for $1.5 billion in cash to a private investment group including Goldberg, Kravis, Roberts & Co., 5 Mile Capital Partners, and Goldman Sachs Capital Partners. The deal includes the payoff of all intra-company debt owed to GMAC, bringing the total value of the deal to $9 billion. The new entity, in which GMAC owns 21% interest, is known as Capmark Financial Group. Now, Paulson was head of Goldman Sachs at that time. Lutz was vice chairman of General Motors, which owns GMAC. Now, it makes sense that they might have held communication during this time of sale of GMAC to the company that holds Goldman Sachs, Capmark Financial Group. It was shortly after the November 14, 2006 Detroit manufacturers and Bush meeting for their bailouts. Could Lutz have influenced Paulson's decision? Very, very, very possibly. Now, it says Paulson here. It says he joined Goldman Sachs in 1974. Paulson has personally built close relationships with China during his